Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar from True North Dynamics. For today's webinar, we're going to be taking a look at Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central and its manufacturing capability. A lot of material to get through. Unfortunately, we won't have more than the planned time, so I will ask if you could put your questions in the chat for me, and we will try to get those answered at the end of the webinar. If we run out of time and I can't get to all the chat questions, go ahead and leave them in the chat and we will respond to people individually. So identify who you are if you don't mind, so we can get the answers back to you appropriately. Okay, so for today's agenda, we want to talk about the manufacturing and Business Central. I want to talk first real quickly about licensing and the transition from an Essentials license, which is what most of you are probably using today. Manufacturing would require a step up to the premium license. We'll talk about those details in just a second. In order to use the manufacturing modules, you need to go through some additional setups at the item level, and we'll walk through what those will be involving. I do want to talk briefly about assemblies, which is kind of the low effort, low level version of manufacturing that is available as part of the Essentials license. Within manufacturing itself, we'll talk about the bills of material, the routings, and the various work order types that are possible inside Business Central's manufacturing. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about MRP, materials requirement planning, and forecasting inside the system. So in terms of licensing, if you have an Essentials license today, you can create assemblies, or kits is another way to think of those. There is a bill of material that goes along with that assembly item. That would include the various components and raw materials. You can also add to your assembly bill of material values that would represent both labor costs or someone who's doing the assembly work or putting together the kit. And if you're doing this through some type of a work center or workstation, are there additional machine costs that would need to be captured so that when we produce the assembled item, we do get an accurate costing for it? Components, labor, machine, all rolled up together. If you're staying with the Essentials license and you're going to go down the assemblies path, you need to understand that that does not include any of the MRP or MPS, Master Production Scheduling, or forecasting capabilities. Those are reserved exclusively for the premium license and the full manufacturing suite. Within that manufacturing suite, as part of the premium license, you get all of the manufacturing capabilities. You will create bills of materials and routings for the produced items, manage the workflow using a work order system. And again, you have the option of running both MRP, MPS, sales forecasts, demand planning, etc., to help you plan and schedule the production that you're going to be going through. If you move on and talk a little bit about the item setup, let me pull up my Business Central system and we'll dive into one of the items. So I'm logged into Business Central. I'm in the manufacturing planner or manufacturing production manager role. So you'll see my menus all relate to manufacturing and products. Under product design, I have my items list. And like all items list in the Business Central system, this will initially show me all of the various items that I have inside the system. That includes my raw materials, my components, items that are purchased directly for resale, etc. I have built two different views that I want to talk about real quickly. I have one view that looks at those items that are manufactured. These are my finished good items. And we'll dig into the details of some of these. We'll come back to the assembly items in just a moment. I want to dig into this AirPot Duo. My sample company is called Contoso Coffee, and it is available in the Microsoft Extension Marketplace as a free download. If you want to download a copy of this data set and get your hands on with manufacturing, you can do that. Just go into the extension marketplace, do a quick search for Contoso. Show that. And then you can download and install this sample company on your own. You can see we have the Contoso coffee demo. There's a US data set, Mexico, Canada, a variety of different countries. Just go ahead and download that now. It's free. It will install into your standard sample company, Contoso Inc. And then you would have access to the various manufacturing functionality, as well as all the sample data, the finished goods, the raw materials, etc. The first couple of tabs inside the item don't really change significantly from the items that you're currently using, things that are just purchased and held for resale. So I'm going to roll up the item, roll up the inventory, costs and prices. I want to focus down here towards the bottom on both the replenishment and on the planning. The first thing you need to specify for the items is how the items are going to be produced or procured. In a standard inventory distribution model, everything is set to purchase. I buy from my vendor, I store it in the warehouse, I sell it on to my customers. You also have the ability to create those assembled items or a production order. And then depending on the selection that gets made here under the replenishment system, you need to specify a little more detail about that particular replenishment. If you're purchasing the item, who's the vendor? What's the vendor item number? You purchase by the each or by the case or by the box, whatever it might be. In this case, we are a production order, and my manufacturing policy is set to make to stock. The alternative is a make to order function. These might be items that I don't want to carry as a regular part of my inventory, but if a customer places a sales order for those, then I can go ahead and from the sales order generate the manufacturing production order. I'll pull the components out of the pick ticket, out of the warehouse, and then send it out to the shop floor for the actual production processes. You'll notice that what is missing here is a make to custom. And we don't really have that capability in the base Business Central manufacturing. If you are a make to custom environment, there are some third-party extensions that are available that we could use for the creation of, let's say, a configurable item where I need to select from a master bill of material and specify how this version of the product is going to be used, what components and functions are going to go into that. I'll leave this as make to stock. After you've specified what the manufacturing policy is going to be, you need to specify both the route that you're going to use and the production bill of material that you're going to use in order to make this item. The routing indicates the steps that the production order will follow across the shop floor. From the time we pick material out of the warehouse and deliver it to the shop floor, can the item be produced in a single step at one work center? Maybe it needs to go through multiple work centers with different activities, different labor rates, different machine rates, etc., at each one of those work centers. We'll take a look at the details of the routing for this item in just a little bit. Similarly, you need to specify what is the production bill of materials. And again, this is the components that will go into the finished good. When you create that production bill of material, it can be either a single level, that is, my finished good is comprised entirely of individual components. You can also embed an additional production item inside the finished good bill of materials. So before I can make this full coffee pot, maybe I have to also create all of the burner and electronic units first. So my production bill of materials can be a blend of both individual components, raw materials, and other produced items. The flushing method is the next consideration. When we flush material out of the inventory system, we can either do it, as I've indicated here, on a manual basis. That is, I will require an employee to go through during the production process and indicate what was the consumed quantity of each raw material, each component, or each subassembly that has gone into this particular finished good. Your alternatives would be to do either what's called a forward flush, and that simply means that at the time the work order is released to the production floor, we're going to make the assumption that all of the required components, including potentially some scrap values, have been consumed, and they will be removed from inventory at the beginning of the production order. Backward is the opposite. I will wait until the production order is completed. I will then back flush all of the raw materials and components, leave them out of inventory at the same time that I'm going through and completing the production order to create my finished goods. We can also tie into the advanced warehouse management capabilities of Business Central, and we can create a pick plus a forward flush, or a pick plus a backward flush. The forward component, the backward component are the same as we've just described. The difference here is I will actually need to generate and release a pick ticket so an employee can go through the stock room, grab the materials that are necessary, and then we would again either forward flush or backward flush once that pick has been completed. Once those values have been established for the replenishment process, how am I going to make more of the finished goods? I'm going to turn our attention briefly to the planning capability. This ties into both the MRP and the MPS, Master Production Scheduling capabilities inside of Business Central. Your reordering policy can be lot for lot, in which case I will produce a specific quantity. That quantity can vary from one production run to the next production run. Every production run, the finished goods would all be grouped together under a single lot. You would all get the same lot number. So I would need to have lot tracking turned on for that particular item. You could also have a fixed reorder quantity where I say, when I need to make more of this product, I'm going to make 100 units at a time. Regardless of what the demand is, regardless of what I have in the forecast, because of efficiencies in the manufacturing process or how I'm going to be consuming raw materials or components, there's some underlying reason that would dictate why I want to do my replenishment always for a fixed quantity. Again, whatever that quantity might be. You can also specify a maximum quantity that could be produced in any one run. That might be a limitation based upon available space inside the warehouse. Even if I have the components to make 1,000 of those finished goods, I only have shelf capacity to make 100. So I would set a maximum quantity of 100. And then if I needed more produced than that, I would have multiple production orders and I would do 100 at a time. Again, each of those could be either lot number controlled or serial number controlled, depending on your needs for that finished good item. And then finally, your reordering policy, if I'm in a make to order environment, I may set that to simply be the order quantity. And if my sales order comes in for 25 units, that's what I'll make in my production run. 50 units, I'll make 50 units, etc. In the lot for lot parameters, if that's what I've chosen for my reordering policy, I would then need to go through and add in some additional details, how I want to manage that. I would include the inventory. If I do that, it's going to be what is the projected available balance once I complete this order. So from a planning perspective, I could see what's going to be created. I'd also need to specify how long of a time frame I would like that lot to be encompassing. 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, whatever that might be. And if I needed to reschedule the production of this order, do I want to push it out for 7 days, push it out for 28 days, whatever it might be. I can also specify both reorder point parameters and order modifiers. The reorder point parameters allow me to determine at what level of my available on-hand inventory do I want to kick off a new production order. So if I sell a lot of these coffee pots, what I might do is wait until I'm down to 10 units. And as soon as I hit 10 available units, I can generate a new production order, and then I would make up to my maximum quantity, whatever it may be. I can specify a maximum on-hand inventory. Again, the physical limitations inside my warehouse. I only have room for 100 of these, so make up to 100, but include what I currently have available. Modify that 100 value by what's available in hand. The order modifiers also get filled out. Do I want to have a minimum order quantity? If somebody orders less than 10 units in this case, I'm not going to release the production order. I'm not going to put it onto the master schedule until I get another order that would take me over that total of 10. And again, by the same logic, I'm not going to produce more than 100 at a time, because maybe when I get to the 100th unit, it's time for me to do some maintenance work at that particular work center. Whatever machinery might be involved, it needs to be cleaned, adjusted, recalibrated, whatever it might be. So don't go beyond 100. And then an order multiple, if you choose, I want to always make these items in multiples of 10s, 10 or 20 or 30. If I got an order for, say, 28 units and my order multiple was set for 10s, then I'm going to increase the production quantity from the 28 that my customer ordered, and I'll roll that up to 30. And I'll simply keep 2 of the extra units on hand and available to fill the next order that comes in, whatever that might be. Okay, so when we talk about the item setups, and we've talked about the replenishment function, and you can do that either as an assembly or as a production order. What is your manufacturing policy? That could be a make to stock or a make to order environment. Again, we do not do make to custom in the Standard Business Central Manufacturing Suite. When we create the routes, we will need to specify the machine center or the work center where the production steps are going to be prepared or carried out. Those machine centers can take care of both the tools or the equipment that's being used and add in the costs associated with those, add in personnel. We can also add in some quality measures, quality control. In order to move from work center 1 to work center 2 as part of that route, I need to do a little bit of testing, maybe on all of the items I produced, maybe on a representative sample, and then carry out the tests, record the results, and if the results meet the minimum thresholds that have been established, I can move that material from work center 1 onto work center number 2. Within the production BOM itself, we will specify the components, whether those are raw materials or other items that have been purchased and are available in the warehouse, or they might again relate to an underlying production order where I'm making a subassembly or a component. And when I run my master production scheduling and I run MRP, we will start at the base level and bubble up. So to make the finished good, I might have to go through a couple of immediate production orders to build up my available on-hand quantity for the various materials that go into that, subassemblies. We talked about the flushing method, whether you're going to do that as a manual and have an individual go through each production order and specify what's been consumed. You can do a forward flush or a pick plus forward. You can do a backward or pick plus backward flush. And those are simply relieving out of the inventory all of the raw materials and components that have been consumed during the production itself. And then on the planning side, we need to specify what is my reorder policy, lot for lot, fixed reorder, a sales order derived quantity, or a specified maximum quantity that the system can produce. If you choose lot for lot, you need to include other inventory items and specify the lot periods that it's going to be 1 day, maybe 1 week, whatever would be appropriate. If we're going to do a fixed reorder, we need to understand what those reorder points are and the reorder quantity. And is there a maximum inventory that needs to be, or we cannot exceed inside the warehouse? How many can we build up to that number? And then finally, the order modifiers, whether it's a minimum order quantity, a maximum order quantity, or some order multiple that we would need. All right, let's talk real quickly then about the assemblies. I'm going to move out of this item card, go back to my list of items, but I want to switch and take a quick look at the assembled items. In this case, I've created a starter pack. This starter pack would include the coffee pot that we were just looking at, but it is also going to include a couple of bags of different types of coffee. So for this item, my replenishment has been set to assembly. I'm going to be assembling to stock, and yes, I do have an assembly BOM present. If I click on the link there, it will open the details of the BOM itself. And in this case, as you can see, we have the coffee pot as item number 1, a sample bag of coffee from 3 different sources, and the labor involved in producing this material or doing this assembly work. In this case, I have a resource named Robert Jones, and it's going to take him 15 minutes to grab the material, put them all in a box, close up the box, and declare that his assembly order is now completed. He doesn't have left to do. Let's take a look real quickly at how that assembly process would work. You create assembly orders, and the assembly order is a pretty straightforward document. There's some general information across the top. Number gets associated automatically. What item am I going to be creating? We're going to produce just 2 of these kits right now. They're just going for samples out to a trade show or something. We'll do 2 of those. Ourselves a little bit of time to get that work done. Then I can now, right? I'm not expecting there to be errors. Won't go any further trying to chase down that error. My apologies. The release function would indicate that we're moving this assembly order from the quote planning stage or the consideration stage and actually want the work to be done. So I would need to change its status to being released. Once all the work has been done, the user comes back in and simply says, I now need to post this transaction. There is no way to capture data during the process when you're using an assembly, which also means that there's no WIP calculation. I cannot tell you anything about what happens between the start and the completion of the assembly. But at the end of that process, what I'm going to end up with is an assembled order. And that assembled order will again relieve my components. It would add in the costs of whatever resources I've associated with that assembly and update my on-hand finished goods. And I've got that assembly piece is now completed. So with the assembly BOMs, you can include both the component items as well as resources, get accurate costing for everything that's going to be assembled. You have 2 options for your assemble policy. You can either do it to order or to stock. On the assembly order itself, you're going to record general information about the document. You'll record the line details. And very important that you include the location codes. Those location codes will indicate both where to pull the raw materials from. If you have multiple warehouses or multiple inventory locations, you'll need to specify where to pull from. You would also specify where to place the finished good. Is it going into a specific warehouse location? If your warehouse locations, you've also turned on the bin capabilities, then you might be directed to a specific bin for the put away process. If you're not directing to a specific bin, then you might be simply asked to indicate to the system, okay, which empty bin did you find? And let's record where those items now live. Finally, you do have the option to create what we call item tracking lines on the assemblies. Those item tracking lines can be used to record information such as serial numbers, lot numbers. You can record either or both in the Business Central system. So my lot might indicate everything that was assembled today in one order, but each one of the individual finished goods has their own individual serial number. I would need to go through and record what serial numbers have either been issued or assigned or generated for those assembled items. Okay, let's get to the heart of the matter then, and let's talk a little bit about manufacturing. Back into Business Central, we'll come back home. I'm going to start in the product design world, and I want to talk first about the routings. I advocate that when routings are created, the routing number that is used for each route has some reference back to the item itself that's going to be produced. I don't like advocating that you create routing 1, routing 2, routing 3. Although if you have a series of items that are all going to go through the same route, maybe we want to come up with a generic product name. In this case, everything is coffee pots. And if all of them were going to go through the same route of the various work centers and machine centers on the shop floor, it may make sense to create a single route called coffee, and then I apply that to all of the different finished goods that I'm going to be creating using that route. In this case, let's open up the route that has been created specifically for the coffee pot that we're focusing on. I give it some basic generic description. What's the number? What's my description? You can either have a serial or a parallel route. A serial route will go in sequence from step 1 to step Z, whatever that might be. In other cases, there may be work functions in the manufacturing process that can be done at simultaneous. And I might split and have some of the operations going through one work center and other operations going through the second work order at the same time. Once both of those work centers have completed their work, then the material gets joined up maybe at the third work center, and that's where I do my finished assembly or something of that nature. So in this case, we have 5 different operations that are using a combination of work centers and machine centers. Operation 10, I'm assembling the body. Operation 20, I'm doing all of the electrical wiring, I'm testing, unpacking, etc. As part of the route, I can also specify time that is involved, whether it is set up the work center to perform this particular operation. In this case, for route operation number 10, it's going to take 20 minutes to get the machines set up. I may have some floor stock items that need to be refilled, screws or fasteners or cable ties or something. That 20 minutes of time will then get added in and allocated across the costs associated with producing the finished good. The run time, wait time, move time, they're all factors that are considered when I run the master production schedule. In order to produce items through this particular route, through these work centers, I know that I've got setup time, I've got run time, I've got wait time for paint to dry, or movement time from one machine to the next. all those values will get included in the calculation to determine how many units can my shop floor produce within a given time period. If you leave those values set to 0, as the wait and move times are here, then we're assuming no time involved, and I should be able to increase my production of this item as it follows its way down through this route. I'll point out across the top, you can copy an existing route and make a new route that is either identical to it with just a new number and a new description, or maybe I'm using it as a starting point and what I need to change are just values for the setup time or the run time or something else, because moving from item A to item B, there's an additional complexity, or I've changed the kind of paint that I'm using and its drying time is a little bit longer than the standard, etc. You can keep multiple versions of the routes. This is useful for determining how an item that was produced, say, 6 months ago or 9 months ago, what steps did it go through? Because maybe I've, in the meantime, purchased some new equipment, I've increased the efficiency of the work center, I can now move more materials through. You can have as many archived versions as you would like. You can only have one active version of your route at any one time. And then finally, the where used. This simply gives me a chance to look up and see for all of the items that I produce on the shop floor, how many of those items are this same route. It would give me a listing of everything I produce that follows this same process. Once the route has been created, I also need to specify what goes into my finished good, my bill of materials. Again, general information across the top. I always recommend that the bill of material number be the same as the finished good item number. It just makes it easier to find things when I'm trying to do some research or I've got a real long list. I don't have to know that my particular airpot duo is using production bomb 1Z532, whatever it might be. Keep your life simple. Just repeat the item number there as your production bomb number. You need to specify the unit of measure. In this case, I'm going to be outputting pieces. This value defaults from the item master itself, from the item card. Whatever we've specified there as the default unit of measure is the same that will be used here, although I could change that. And in some circumstances, I might want to have an each or a piece for the default unit of measure, but I make them by the box, I make them by the case, I make them by the pallet, whatever my output measure is going to be. Under the status, you have either certified or new. In order to actually create an item, the bill of material must be set to certified. New is simply something that I have started, but it has not yet moved beyond that. You can also, though, create production bill of materials that are what we call under development. And this really relates to one of the manufacturing order types we'll talk about in just a moment, where you have essentially a tool that allows me to play what if. I can use that for costing or for quoting, because maybe I'm considering a change in material. A different supplier has said that he can provide my components at a better price. I'd like to see what that would look like. So I could create an under development production bill of material and then have that available for my planning and my calculating purposes. And if at some point I decide that that is going to be the one I want to use, I would come here to the original, change its status to closed. We're no longer going to be using that. And I would promote the under development bill of material that I've been working on for quoting, for costing, etc., and make that one my certified bill of material, change its status. As we had with the routes, we also have different version numbers. You have only one active version, but you can have those closed, archived. Again, very useful if I'm doing something like a product recall. I can go back and find out for that particular item what bill of material was used to create that, even if it's no longer current. Keep all that information in the history of my bills. And then I get down to the line itself, where I'm going to specify each one of the different components that are going to go into my finished good. What quantity will I need to produce 1 unit of output for the finished good? Different measures of codes there. In some cases, I might be consuming material and I want to include a scrap percentage. During the wiring phase of building coffee pots, I might say that each of my coffee pots is going to use 10 feet of electrical wire. But there's always little bits that get cut, little bit of snips that I don't use, mistakes get made. I want to include a 10% scrap value. In that case, when the pick ticket is generated for the warehouse employee to go gather the materials, they would be instructed to gather 11 feet of wire. I need 10 feet at the end of the day. I'm anticipating that I'm going to lose 1 foot to scrap, so let's go pull 11 feet to get started. As we had with the routes, I have the ability to copy a BOM. I have the ability to view older versions. And the where used function really doesn't apply to my finished good production bill of material. It really applies to the components or the sub-assemblies, because there may be a sub-assembly that I'm working on here, and I use that same sub-assembly in 3 or 4 or 5, however many other production finished goods. So if I was anticipating making a change here to this production bill of material, what else would it impact? What would be the downstream effects of making that change? So we've now completed the item setup. We've told Business Central how we want to acquire more of that finished good. We've identified the route that it will take across the shop floor during the production process. We've identified the bill of material for the components, the raw materials, the sub-assemblies that will be necessary to create the finished good. The next step in the process is to actually move forward and generate the production orders themselves. In the Business Central system, there are essentially 5 different production order types. And if you're familiar with Business Central and the purchasing module or the sales module, we like to have a kind of standard layout for related transaction types. So a simulated production order will visually appear very similar to a released production order or a finished production order. The difference lies in what the different production order types are used for. Let's start with the simulated production order. These are used for quoting and for costing, as I mentioned earlier. It's the what if playground. Maybe I've got a new customer who's approached me about producing a new item. I could create a simulated production order and see what the results would be in terms of my costing, my timing, my capabilities. With a simulated production order, it has no impact on either materials requirement planning or master production scheduling. They are often a little unique world by themselves. At the completion of the quoting process, if my customer gives me the green light to go ahead, I can now convert my simulated production order into one of the next steps, either planned or firm planned. Just like you can take a sales quote and convert it to a sales order, convert the sales order to a sales invoice once it's been shipped. With the different production orders, I'm simply advancing them from one stage to the next in their life cycle. I don't have to recreate the document from the beginning. All the data entry that's been done initially will be retained as I move through these different cycles. Planned production orders Open one up so you can get a quick look at it. There's a couple ways that we can get a planned production order into the system. The most obvious, of course, is I run MPS and I run MRP, and based on the various quantity parameters that I defined at the item level, the system will determine that I'm going to need to make some more of that finished good. I'm approaching my safety stock or my reorder point quantity. Time to make more of it. With the planned production orders, they can also be generated directly from a sales order. During the sales order entry process, the sales team has entered in the line item representing the finished good, and they got a notification that there is not sufficient quantity on hand to fulfill the sales order. The Business Central will recognize that that is a produced item and will offer to create a production order. When that production order is created from the sales order, they're going to be linked together in the background. This does a couple of things for you. One, at the completion of the manufacturing process, I can now update the sales order and say that I now have an available quantity ready to ship. I go through my standard shipping and invoicing process and move that material. The produced quantities are going to be already allocated back to the sales order where they originated. So I don't have to worry about somebody else coming in and grabbing my items and putting them on their sales order. If they were entering a sales order for the same item, they'd get the same message. There are no available units to satisfy that second sales order. Would you like to create a production order to make some of them? We're going to be automatically allocating the output from the production order back to the sales order where it originated. You can, as I said, also generate planned production orders directly out of the MRP system. Looking back at the values created on the item in terms of quantities, we can recognize that simply to get the inventory back up to the appropriate carrying level, I'm going to need to produce some quantity of those finished goods. And I can run that MRP process for all of my finished goods or a subset of finished goods or just a single finished good at a time. Then generate the appropriate production orders based upon those outputs. After planned production order, we have firm planned production orders. They, again, would be promoted from the planned up to the next status, firm planned production orders. And what this does is it now creates a placeholder in the planning schedule. The original planned production orders are, again, kind of a what if. They're not really tied to a calendar yet. When I move them from planned production orders to firm planned production orders, now my master production scheduling tool will recognize that this is going to require time at various work centers based on the route. It will start to calendar in when can that production order actually be started, when would it be finished. That information goes back into the inventory module, and the sales team could see, I don't have any of that product today, but I can see that we are planned to produce those. I should have them available to ship in a week, in 2 weeks, whatever the output time would be. Once a firmed planned production order has been generated, either from the MRP system, or it could come directly from a sales order as well, if you give your salespeople the opportunity to impact scheduling in that regard. The next step in the process is to actually release that production order out onto the shop floor. I've got my AirPot Duo here. This has been released. It has not yet been completed. In this case, we're trying to produce 175 units of this. I think I'm going to have enough quantity in hand to do that. What I would need to do at the line level now, are a couple of key steps. I need to go into the item tracking lines, and I would need to generate serial numbers, all of the finished goods for whatever quantity I'm going to be producing in this particular case. The assign serial number is a numbering schema that you set the beginning value and the ending value and simply take the next, in this case, 175 serial numbers and assign them automatically to each one of the products that we're about to produce. You can also create customized serial numbers if you need to. Maybe your customer has requested that they get their own specific, unique set of serial numbers. I could create those here by creating a customized serial number range exclusive to this order. Of course, we will make sure that in the background we never duplicate serial numbers. Everything has to. I mentioned earlier you can also track by lot number, and that's not uncommon to have all of today's production be recorded under a single lot. But each one of the finished good outputs will have their own unique serial number. We use that for tracing the product, again, for product recalls, returns, things like that. Or if you're using the field service module, then when a technician is out in the field looking at the item that you manufactured, when they scan or look up the serial number, that will take them back to the specific bill of material and the specific route that was used to produce that finished good, even if those are no longer current, if we switch to a different operation or a different set of components, something of that nature. After the item tracking information has been created, I would need to go into the production journal. Because I've set my item to be a manual release as opposed to a backward flush or a forward flush, I would now need to go through and indicate how many of these have been completed. I could indicate that. I can preview error messages about the serial numbers, sufficient quantities, etc. This step, the production journal, and when I post it, this is what is going to recognize the consumption of all of my raw materials and increase the quantity on hand and available of my finished good. This step surprisingly gets overlooked far too often, and we have to come back and remind people, did you post all of your production? Okay, good. If you're using the forward pick or the backward pick options, then you don't need to go through this step. I simply would transfer my released production order. I would want to change its status, indicate that it's now finished, specify the posting date, update the unit costs, and click yes. When I post the released production order, that would automatically take care of the consumption of whatever raw materials and components. So the distinction or the decision on what we're going to use for the fulfillment method, the manual or backward or forward picking, etc., may come down to the finished goods themselves. Do I need to record lot numbers? Need to record serial numbers? In those cases, I would probably advocate for using a manual process. So someone does have to come in and post the consumption. If it's not going to be lot controlled or serial controlled, in those cases, maybe I just want to do a straight backward flush. I'll get to the end, I'll post my production order, and that will automatically consume all the raw materials and components. Go back out of that. The last step in the manufacturing process is the conversion of that released production order into a finished production order. This is the history side. I don't have the ability to go in and really change anything. You can see all the values on this window are grayed out. They're all locked down and system controlled. If I come into the line, I can go back and look at the item tracking, are all the serial numbers that were generated, all part of a single lot, quantities associated with each one. When you generate either lot or serial number, you can also specify how long will the warranty period be. Good for 90 days, good for 365 days, good for 5 years, and we'll keep track of when the warranty will expire. Because in the Business Central system, the warranty period starts when the item is produced, not when the item is sold. Same thing with the lot expiration date. If we're doing anything that has a limited shelf life, I might want to indicate that there's only 9 months of shelf life for this product. So anything produced today will have an expiration date 9 months out into the future. Again, the components list would allow me to drill back. Components, sure. The routing that was used to produce these items, all of this information is going to get tracked and stored for you. It should be available for. Okay, so on the manufacturing orders then, we really have 5 different types. We have the simulated production orders used for quotes and costing, has no impact or no influence on either MRP or MPS. Planned production orders can either be created from a sales order or generated from the MRP run. A firm planned production order could also be created from a sales order. And importantly, it now starts to create placeholders for this production order in the planning schedule. I'm reserving time both at the work center, the machine center, and the resource level. A released production order, again, it can go straight from a sales order if you wish to allow that. That was used to record the consumption of all of my raw materials and my finished goods. It's used for assigning lot numbers and serial numbers if you're going to be tracking either of those or both of those on your production orders. And then finally, we have the finished production orders themselves. It's the final step in the process. It completes the costing. This is where I'm going to recognize all of the costs that have gone into the production of those finished goods. They all get rolled up into a total unit cost value. Okay, timing's looking pretty good. The last piece that we want to discuss, and I'll run through this pretty quickly, are the MRP and MPS functions inside of Business Central. And what these are essentially are a set of planning worksheets. I have 4 different types of planning worksheets. The planning worksheet is going to be the result where I would generate a new MRP run. This is for items that I'm going to be producing internally. Again, based upon those quantity values established at the item level, we can determine how much needs to be produced, by when it needs to be produced, and what would I need to purchase or assemble myself in order to create the planned output quantity, where my production orders that I'm going to be creating. The requisition worksheets, these are going to again be created based upon MRP. These are the purchase orders that are being suggested based upon the planned production coming out of the MRP, and I would need to review, approve, and then release those purchase orders out to my vendors or to my suppliers to make sure that I have a sufficient quantity on hand and available of the various raw materials and components that go into my finished good. The subcontracting worksheets are those purchase orders that I would be releasing out to a subcontractor who is going to be one of the steps within my route. You do have the ability in Business Central's manufacturing to include outsourced steps during the production of a finished good. An example of that might be somebody who creates bathtub fixtures, um, handles and fillers and drains and shower heads and whatever else. But they sometimes will offer those materials in a variety of special finishes. They don't do any of that special finish work in-house. That's all done through a subcontractor. So when I'm producing the finished good, one of the steps in my route would be to deliver the material in process over to my subcontractor. That's controlled by a purchase order. When the subcontractor completes their work and returns the material to me, I can receive the purchase order, and then I can move on to the next step in my route. The subcontracting worksheet will be used to identify what outsourced vendors I need to be working with, what production orders they're going to be part of, and then generate the purchase orders going out to them so that they're aware that I'm going to have some work coming their way for whatever specialty operation they might include. And the final worksheet is a standard cost worksheet. This is what I use if I have specified in my item setups that I'm going to use a standard costing model. I periodically want to go through the standard cost worksheet and compare. How does my standard compare today to the actual costs being associated with the raw materials, components, subassemblies, the work centers, machine centers, the resources? And based upon that current information, I may make a decision to change my standard cost value for the items going forward. Based upon that standard cost worksheet, I could see that I've got a big difference between today's standard, today's actuals. It's time to go through and do a refresh, update my standard cost. Depending on my pricing model, that may or may not include an increase to my base price for the items as well. So to review, planning phases, both materials requirement planning and master production scheduling are included as part of the standard manufacturing suite. Master production schedule, I'm going to base that on actual demand as indicated in my sales, open sales orders, as well as any sales or demand forecast that's been created. Take the sum of those and determine when can I start to schedule in the production of items. Those finished goods on the master production schedule can come either from the forecast and or the sales order line details themselves. MRP, again, based on actual demand and demand forecast, but not at the finished good level. It's looking at the component level. The results of that MRP run then is going to be for any items that are not part of the master production scheduling, my finished goods. Again, if I have to, I would then issue purchase orders out to my vendors so that they could supply me with the required materials, components, whatever it might be. With those two pieces in place, I'm then looking at the outputs on the 4 different worksheets we went through. The planning worksheet, requisitions worksheet, subcontracting, the standard cost worksheet. And that brings us to the end of this webinar. I apologize, we have consumed the full hour, so we won't get a chance to take any questions live. If there was information that you would like more details on, or if you'd like to arrange a more personalized demo of the manufacturing suite in Business Central, I'm happy to do that. That's my email up on the screen. Just send me a quick email. We'll get that on the calendar. You can, of course, also reach out to your client success manager or your project manager, whoever would be appropriate. Get in touch with them and just say, hey, I saw John's webinar on manufacturing and we'd like to learn, like to get an estimate for what it would take to transition from the essentials that we're currently using into the premium license model, because we want to take on the manufacturing. I hope this has been informative for everyone. I will thank you all very much for your time and attention, and we'll look forward to seeing you again on our next webinar. Thank you very much.